Okay, number 72. Remember, this is section 8.7, and this is on page 608. So 72 looks like this. It says this. It says, well, the direction says this. Direction says perform the indicated operation. And it'll also say, don't forget to simplify. So in your worksheet, it'll say simplify. All right, so 72 says add, the word add, this expression, 3y minus 5, to this expression, y plus 16. So add those two expressions. All right, so here you're adding. So adding is easy. So basically, you're just going to take both expressions and what to them? Add them up. And parentheses aren't necessary here. So you just say 3y minus 5 plus y plus 16. What am I doing to those expressions? Doing what to them? Adding. Now then it says simplify. What does simplify mean here? Combine like terms. When I combine like terms, what do I get? 4y plus 11? So there's your answer. Okay? So the adding part's easy. Now let's look at the word subtract. All right, 74. Subtract. And that's the one that they have subtract on my math lab. So subtract 4x minus 7 from 12 plus x. So subtract 4x minus 7 from 12 plus x. Remember the phrase subtract from. So when you see the phrase subtract from, what do? You reverse the order. So what expression should be listed first? 12 plus x. So you can say 12 plus x, and whatever that is, you're subtracting from it. Subtract from it what expression? 4x minus 7. Now be careful. This right here is not correct. You're not subtracting 4x. You're not subtracting 4x. What are you subtracting? What expression? What expression are you subtracting? 4x minus 7. So you got to put that in parentheses. So when you have the word subtract from, you need to put that expression in parentheses. Now, in that worksheet that's due tonight, and some of you came here early, and you worked with each other, and you asked questions. You need to try and get here early as possible if you have any questions. But on that worksheet, you had something look like this. And so you got to get rid of the parentheses. Now, get rid of the parentheses doesn't mean you take this x or this 12 and you multiply everything into it. You got to look at what's on the outside right here. What's this number right here? Negative 1. So you're distributing a negative 1. All right, so basically everything in here you multiply by negative 1. So you're going to have 12 plus x. Now what does that become?
Negative 4x.
Right, because a negative 1 times a negative 7 is a positive 7. And now simplify your final answer. What do you do?
3x.
So you're combining like terms. It's not 3x though.
Negative 3x.
Negative 3x
Plus 19.
plus 19. Now those of you that came in a while ago, I need those worksheets turned in. Okay, so 74, and then 76, you have subtract L minus 3 from 2L minus 6. Two m minus 6 is first. And you're subtracting from that. What are you subtracting? What would you put m minus 3? Parentheses. Good. Now what's the next step? Get rid of the parentheses by using distributive property. What will you multiply everything inside the parentheses by? Negative 1. So what do I write right here?
2 minus 6. Positive 3.
Right, because a negative times a positive is a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Combine like terms, 2m minus m is m. And what's a negative 6 and a positive 3? Now remember, negative 6 and positive 3 are called what kind of terms? Constants. They're like terms, but they're constants, right? All right, so m minus 3. All right, so on your My Math Lab, you'll see subtract from like that. Okay? All right, so I'm going to assign 8.7 tomorrow. So you have about a week to do it. Okay? All right, so what's that?
Quick question. With the 2m minus the m, why wouldn't it be a negative m?
Because a positive 2 and a negative 1 is a positive 1.
Got it. Okay.
Okay? All right. Now, those of you that came in a while ago, I'm assuming you've already turned in the worksheets. That's why I didn't see anything. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. All right. Now, let's continue with section 9.1. Okay, 9.1, remember, that's where you're talking about the addition property of equality. The addition property of equality. All right, so basically what you add or subtract from one side of an equation, you do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so if I add 3 to one side, I got to add 3 to the other side. If I add 7x to one side, I add 7x to the other side. If I subtract, I subtract. Okay? So we looked at some examples, so let's continue on looking at some of these examples. Let's see, so this is on page 630. Page 630. And let's see, let's look at, all right, so this is going to be number 10. Number 10. Okay, you have y subtract y, that's a y, subtract 4/7, and that's equal to a negative 3/14. Y subtract 4/7 equals to a negative 3/14. All right, now this section is easy because this is one operation you got to do. So how do you get the variable y by itself? Add 4/7 to both sides. So right now I'm subtracting 4/7. The opposite of subtracting 4/7 is to add 4/7. So I'm going to add 4/7 to both sides. So I'm going to align them vertically, just like this. And then we're going to combine like terms. So a negative 4/7 and a positive 4/7, they're opposites. When you add two numbers that are opposites, you get 0. And y and 0 is y, equal. All right, now you can't add these by adding numerators and adding denominators. You got to find the LCD first. So 14. So I'm going to rewrite this horizontally like this, and let's do it by hand. So what's the least common denominator? 14. So you write two fractions with that denominator, and now you're going to write equivalent fractions. So 14 times what is 14? So what I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. It kind of makes sense because negative 3/14 is equivalent to itself. 7 times what is 14? What I do to the denominator, I do to the numerator. 4 times 2 is 8. So now since the denominators are the same, you can add those two fractions now. You just add their numerators. What's a negative 3 and a positive 8? 5. So that's 5 over 14. So y equals 5/14. Okay, so that's by hand. You need to do it by hand as well. You need to know how to do that. Now in your calculator, use your calculator. So in the calculator, now guys, make sure when you take the test, you already know how to use your calculator. You're not struggling trying to figure out your calculator test because you're going to run out of time. So make sure you know how to use your calculator.
Can we have notes just on how to use the calculator?
No. All right.
You get here 30 minutes early.
What are you asking me?
To show me how to.
We're doing it right now.
Okay. I get kind of anxious during a test.
If it's a different calculator, I'm hoping it's the same calculator. Then all you do is this. You press clear.
Look, I need all the math.
All right. So you say negative 3/14. The negative button's right here. So negative 3 divided by 14. Notice it says negative 3/14. You're adding 4 divided by 7. Notice what this is in the displays, what you have here. Then what's the next thing, guys? Equal. So there's your decimal. Now, you know you don't write your answer as a decimal. You leave it as a fraction since you was given as a fraction. So how do you change this to a fraction? Second. PRB. So notice it'll say fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction. Then you press enter equal. So you get this proper fraction. It's not a mixed number because it's just what? 5/14. So you're done. And that's all we've been using a calculator with. We didn't do anything else with this calculator.
The negative is the ANS.
The negative is a what now? The negative is right here.
Is right next to the answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 3 divided by 14. And then equal or then second PRB.
Plus 4/7.
Oh,
And then PRB, and then second, and then PRB.
4/7. So 4 divided by 7.
Yes.
Okay. And then second.
Second PRB, and then press enter. Okay. Now let's look at this. Okay, this is number 14. All right, you have 3n plus 2n equal 7 plus 4n. Okay, so in this section, what we did at this point was we used the addition property of equality and we combined like terms. Usually, though, when we get to more complicated equations, there are some steps you're going to go through. One of them is this. So let's kind of talk about these steps. So the first step is to get rid of the parentheses, if you have any. All right, so you can get rid of the parentheses if you have any. If you do, just think about what you turned in today. How'd you get rid of those parentheses? Distributive property. So you can get rid of the parentheses by using distributive property. Usually, when you get rid of the parentheses, now it's not always the case, but a good bit of the time it is, the next step is to combine like terms. All right. And then once you combine like terms, then the next step is to then use the addition property of equality.
In layman's terms, is that basically saying get the variable by itself?
Yeah. But
I know I need to know the addition.
yes, you do. Yeah. So the addition property of equality, and then in section 2, you're going to learn about the multiplication property of equality. So then you're going to use the multiplication property of equality. Multiplication property of equality. So basically, those are the 4 things you're going to use when solving an equation. Now, in section 3, now you can kind of use this in sections 1 and 2. In section 3, you're going to see another way. If you have fractions, one way is to clear the fraction. That would be your third step, so to speak. So we're going to change the steps here a little when we get to that section. But for these 2 sections, that's really all you need. So in this number 14, do you have any parentheses?
No.
So you're not going to use distributive property at all. But can I combine like terms on either side?
Yes.
Yeah, so which side can I combine like terms?
Left side.
The left. What's 3n plus 2n?
5n.
5n. So I combine like terms here, and I get 5n equals 7 plus 4n. So that's where I'm at. Okay, so then the next step is to use the addition property of equality. Now, notice that you have a constant on only one side. You have variables on both sides. Now, it doesn't matter whether you bring the constants to one side or the variables to the other, but you need to be strategic. Since the constant only appears on one side, leave it there. Bring the variables to the other side. In other words, see this 4n? Bring it to the left-hand side. So right now, what am I doing to the 7? What am I doing to the 7? Right now, what does it say? I'm doing what to 7? Adding 4n. What's the opposite of adding 4n? Subtract 4n. So the addition property of equality says I'm going to subtract 4n from both sides. So just keep in mind that what I'm using here, now you don't, on a test, you don't write what I'm writing here, but in your mind, that's what you're doing. You're using the addition property of equality. Okay, that's what you just used. So if I subtract 4n from the right side, I subtract 4n from the left side. Now, almost always at this point, when you do the addition property of equality, you're going to combine like terms again. So what's 5n minus 4n? N. And when I combine these like terms, what do I get here? 0. And so what's 7 plus 0? 7, and you're done. You solve for n. You found your solution. Okay, now remember, this is called, I wrote this out last time, that's called a solution. So in other words, this equation that you started out with, this equation, wherever you see the variable n, if you plug in 7, the left side better equal the right side. Now you don't have time to check on a test. I'm not going to ask you to check on a worksheet, but if you want to check your solution, my math lab will say check, but there's no place in my math lab for you to check. But if you check your solution, wherever you see the variable n, you have to go back to the original. Wherever you see the variable n, you're going to plug in what number? 7. So I have 3 times 7, that's n, plus 2 times 7, and I want to see if that's going to equal 7 plus 4 times 7, right? And then on the left side, I use the order of operations. I have multiplication, addition, multiplication. What do I do? So I would do this multiplication first, 7 times 3,
21.
plus this multiplication next. What's 21 plus 14? 35, so the left side's 35. Over here, I have addition, multiplication. What do I do first? And what's 7 plus 28? 35. So 7 is a solution. Okay, so remember, that's a solution. So remember, a solution, when we talk about solutions, we're talking about solving an equation. And so that number 7 satisfies the equation. Now, whenever you do these steps here, whenever you do these steps, you're writing equivalent equations. So see how that the original equation looks different than this equation? They're equivalent, meaning that the solution to this is a solution to this. You can check. What's 5 times 7? 35. What's 4 times 7? 28 plus 7 is what? 35. So equivalent equations are equations that have the same solution. All right, so whenever you're doing the steps, you're writing equivalent equations. And you want to get it to the equation that gets n by itself. So earlier someone said, is that where you get n by itself? Yeah, that's where you get n by itself. But notice the steps. So in the worksheet, it'll say, show steps as presented in class. Okay? Don't be lazy. If you want your points, you show steps as presented in class. All right. All right, let's look at 16. All right, 16. You have this. You have 13 elevenths y, 13 elevenths y, minus 2 elevenths y equals -3. All right, so step 1 would be, we're about to have something with parentheses in it, but does this equation have parentheses?
No.
No. So step 2 is to do what? Combine like terms. Can I combine like terms? Yes. Now remember, these numbers are already the same, so it's an easy kind. What's 13 11s subtract 2 11s? 11 11s. But what's 11 11s? 1. So I'm going to ask you again. What's 13 11s subtract 2 11s? That's just y. You're done. What's y? -3. There's your solution. 18. Now, in the next section, or in section 3, you're going to be dealing with equations where you're going to have fractions that are going to be different. But here, they're the same, so that's the easy kind. 18, you have 4x minus 4 equals 10x minus 7x. So 4x minus 4 equals 10x minus 7x. All right. If you look at those 4 steps I wrote, which one are you going to do first?
Combine like terms.
Yeah, because there are no parentheses. Can I combine like terms anywhere?
Yes.
On which side?
Right side.
So what's 10x minus 7x? 3x. All right, so I get 4x minus 4 equals 3x. Okay, now, we haven't talked about the multiplication property of equality yet. So I'm going to do this way, and then I'm going to come back and do it once we talk about the multiplication property. Okay? A while ago, when we did this, when I said this, I said since a constant appears on just one side, leave it there and bring the variables to the other side. Okay? And it was simple because we ended up with what letter here? In what was the coefficient? Coefficient, not solution, coefficient. 1. Coefficient of the variable n is 1. You see, you already forgot the word coefficient. You have to turn that in today. All right. So here, though, if you use that same idea, we're going to have a little issue because we hadn't talked about the multiplication property. So you see the variable, the constant appears only in this side. So the idea would be to get rid of this 4x. But leave it here. Leave the 4x here. And when we talk about the multiplication property, we'll come back and we'll do this a different way. So I'm going to leave the 4x here, meaning that I want to get rid of this -4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Now, remember, when we add, we align like terms, right? So these are alike. But if I add 4 here, anything alike here? No. So I'm going to do it kind of like this. I'm going to add 4 like that. Because if and you could put 4 under the 3x, but if you're going to say that's 7x, then don't do it. Because 3x plus 4 is not 7x. They're not like terms. So just write it as 3x plus 4. Now combine like terms. What's on this side? What's on this side? Very good. And then one more step and you're done. What's the next step? Subtract 3x from both sides. Subtract 3x from both sides. So notice I use the addition property of equality how many times? Twice. The addition property of equality here. So when you solve these equations, they become more complicated. These steps you're going to use more than once. That's equality, not equation. It's addition property of equality. Then you combine like terms, and then you use the addition property of equality again. And then you combine like terms again. So remember, each time, for the most part, each time you use the addition property of equality, chances are you're going to combine like terms. And I can combine like terms. What's 4x minus x? Minus 3x? 1 what? X. So just x. So remember, if you say 1x, I'm not going to take any points, but you got to remember mathematically, as you get through your courses, you need to learn just to say what? X. Equal, that's 0, and you're left with what? And there's your solution. That's your solution. And you could check it. If you want to check it, this is what it would look like. You would say this. So where you see the variable x, where are you going to substitute? 4. So 4 times 4 minus 4. And you want to see if that's going to equal 10 times what? 4 minus 7 times what? 4. Okay. On the left side, let's use the order of operations. What do you do first? 4 times 4? What's 16 minus 4? 12? Okay. So the left side's 12. On this side, we have two multiplications. What's 10 times 4? What's 7 times 4? And what's 40 minus 28? 12. Okay? So 4 is the solution. All right. Let's look at 20. Let's do number 2. All right, number 20. We can do number 20. All right, number 20. All right, 20. You have negative 4z. I'm sorry, negative 4 in parentheses. Z minus 3 equal 2 minus 3x. All right, so the first step, you do have parentheses. So what's the first step? Distribute a property. So what's going to be the left side?
Negative 4z plus 12.
Plus 12. Okay, equal, and then 2 minus 3x. Okay? All right, so I'm going to tell you what step to do next because we haven't talked about the multiplication property. In fact, what I'm going to do next is actually talk about the multiplication property because it looks like there have problems in here in which you could use the multiplication property. So let's just do this. I'm going to tell you what to do next. Let's go ahead and at some point bring the variables to the right-hand side. Okay? That doesn't be our goal. Bring the variables to the right-hand side. So that means I want to bring the constants to the what? Left-hand side. All right, so now notice. I want to get rid of this 2, right? So ask yourself, is adding 2 or subtracting 2 going to help me? Subtract 2. Adding 2 is not going to help. Because what's 2 plus 2? 4. So that's what you got to ask yourself. Is adding 2 or subtracting 2 going to help? Adding 2 doesn't help because 2 plus 2 is 4. I want a what there? A 0. I want that to go away. So I'm going to do what to both sides? Subtract 2. Notice I'm aligning my like terms. I'm aligning my constants. So remember, what I'm using here is called the addition property of equality. Now here's something I see every semester, and even though I write on a worksheet that it's incorrect, some individuals still do it on the test, and they get upset because they get something marked wrong. So here's the issue. Some people will say just a 2 underneath. You got to tell me what you're doing. Am I adding 2 or am I subtracting 2? I'm subtracting 2, so you got to say subtract 2. If you're adding 2, you got to say what? Plus 2. Okay? Don't just say 2. You got to tell me what operation you're doing. So whenever you do the addition property of equality, you got to list the operation. Either going to say subtract 2, or you're going to say, like we did here, you're going to say what? Add 4. Did I just write a 4? Or did I say plus 4? Plus 4. All right, so don't forget to do that. All right, then remember, almost always, every time you do the addition property of equality, what's going to be the next step? Combine like terms. So what's 12 and a negative 2? So what's the left-hand side? Plus 10. Equal, and then this becomes what? 0, negative 3x? All right. So remember, it's negative 3x, not 3x, so you got to be careful. Now let's bring the variables to the right. So ask yourself again, is subtracting 4z or adding 4z going to help? Adding. Because you want to think of opposites. Negative 4z, what we talked about this before, the additive inverse. What's the additive inverse of a negative 4z?
4z.
4z. So you're going to add 4z to both sides. I'm sorry. I said the variable wrong here. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It's me. That's a z, excuse me, right here.
I was wondering.
No, yeah, because we would not. Yeah, you're kind of like, well, which variable do we solve for? That's a z. I'm sorry. I realized something was wrong when I was like, well, wait a minute, there are 2 variables here. All right, so I'm going to add 4z to both sides, right? Now, remember, this is the addition property of equality. You don't have to write any of this, the words. You don't have to write any of this down, but you need to know that you're actually using those. And then and then you combine like terms. These are opposites. When you add opposites, you get what? 0 plus 10 is 10. A negative 3z and a positive 4z is z. And there's your answer.
And if I had done it the way that we did the previous problem, that would have been okay?
Say it again.
If I had done it the way we had done the previous problem, where I had taken a constant, moved it to the right, and I had taken...
That's fine. You would have ended up, though, with a negative z.
Well, if I had taken it...
If you would have brought the variables to the right, that's what you did? Is that what you did?
I hadn't done it, I was doing it in my head.
Well, a negative 4z and a positive 3z is a negative z.
Yes.
All right, we hadn't talked about the multiplication property. So let's go ahead and talk about the multiplication property. So that way, and there's some other equations here where you can get a negative z. So let's talk about the multiplication property. Then we'll come back and do something like this again. So we talked about the addition property. Let's talk about the multiplication property of equality. Section 9.2, multiplication property of equality. Multiplication property of equality. So we look at a very simple example that you can do in your head, and then we're going to see how this multiplication property applies. So if you had this very simple equation, solve 4x equal, let's say 12. What is the solution? 3. So x has to be what number? 3, because 4 times 3 is 12, right? Okay, so remember, you're just like you did in the previous problems, you were trying to get the variable by itself. So here I need to get x by itself. Right now, when you're looking at it, what am I doing to x?
Subtracting 4.
Say it again.
Subtracting 4.
No. What am I doing? Read this to me. You're multiplying by 4. 4x means 4 times 4, right? So when I say right now, I want you to tell me what it is that you see. X is being multiplied by what? 4. What's the opposite of multiplication? Division. So what you do to one side, you do the other. So the opposite, just like we're talking about, the opposite of addition is what? Subtraction. The opposite of subtraction is addition. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And then you simplify. Now, I'm not using the word combine like terms because that's not what's happening here. Combine like terms is when you use the addition property of equality. Here I'm using what property? Multiplication property. So here you're going to simplify. 4 divided by 4 is what? No. 4, answer my question. 4 divided by 4 is? No. 4 divided by 4 is not x. 4 divided by 4 is what? 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So you're not listening to my words. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Okay? So that is a 1. What some of you do is you cross this out and you don't put anything there, and that confuses you later on. You need to put a number there. Just like when I did the addition property, I didn't cross things out. I put what in its place? Right here. 0. Because here you're combining like terms. When you use the addition property of equality, you're going to combine like terms. Here, when you use the multiplication property of equality, you're simplifying. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 1 times x is x. Just like I did when I said this. 0 plus 10 is what? 10. 1 times x is x. Okay, so notice the difference. You need to make sure you're writing these numbers. Don't just cross things out, because if that's a habit, you're going to struggle at some point. You're going to get most of this, but you're not going to get more than 90%. You're going to get less than 90% on this because you're not quite knowing what to do with this.
So you want to see when we cross it out, what's the number supposed to be under?
Yeah, you're supposed, mathematically, you're supposed to write it. Okay, you're supposed to put a 1 there. All right, and what's 12 divided by 4?
3.
So there's your answer.
Will you mark off if we don't do that?
On a worksheet I will, because you have time to remember to do it. Okay? So I'm going to force you to do it. Because mathematically, that's what happens. I mean, you have to know that 4 divided by 4 is 1. You'd be surprised when I ask you and I say you cross this out, what goes there? You'd be surprised how many people don't know the answer to that question. Because all they do is just cross it out with not really knowing what really is there. Someone said 0 a while ago. That's not 0, that's what? 1. So you see why I'm forcing you to do it? Why I'm forcing you to say that this right here is what number? 0. Otherwise, you really wouldn't know it. You just say, well, I was always told to cross it out.
Like, the first thing that goes through my mind is it cancels each other out.
Yeah, canceling means 0. That's not canceling. Don't use the word canceling there. So I need you to use correct mathematical terminology. Don't use the word canceling, though.
We don't use the 2 words.
Don't use that. Okay, you learned that a long time ago. That was incorrect. Don't use that. So that's what's causing sometimes you to have gaps in knowledge because you're using the wrong terminology. All right. So that's even though I said divide, that's still the multiplication property of equality. There's no division property of equality. There's just multiplication. Because remember, dividing is the opposite of what operation? Multiplication. All right. So it's still the multiplication property of equality.
Well, and even whenever you're dividing fractions, you technically are using multiplication.
Because you're multiplying by the reciprocal. You learned that last semester. Yeah. So we're going to do one with fractions in a little while. Okay. Now let's look at this. Suppose you had negative 4x equal negative 20. Negative 4x equal negative 20. So let's go through the steps.
Okay.
Do you have any parentheses? Nope. Am I going to use the addition property of equality at all?
No.
No. Am I going to use the multiplication property of equality? Yes. Okay, so I got to get the variable x by itself. Right now, what am I doing to x? That's not what I'm doing right now. I'm multiplying by negative 4. And you got to remember that this negative 4 is the coefficient, right?
Yes.
Negative 4 is the coefficient of x. Remember, the coefficient is whatever you're multiplying the variable by. That's what you turned in today. You had to, one of the worksheets asks you to determine the coefficient. Coefficient is whatever you're multiplying the variable by. The coefficient of x here is what?
Negative 4.
I got to get rid of that coefficient. What's the opposite of multiplication?
Division.
Division. So I divide both sides by what? Negative 4. You divide by the coefficient. The coefficient. And now remember, that's not combined like terms. This is what we're doing now.
Dividing.
That was what I just did, but now we're going to simplify. We're going to simplify. Write down the word simplify. So this right here is the multiplication property of equality. That's what I used. And now we're going to simplify to get our answer. What is negative 4 divided by negative 4? 1. 1 times x is x. What's negative 20 divided by negative 4?
5.
Positive 5. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And it kind of makes sense because what's is negative 4 times 5 a negative 20 in the original equation? Is negative 4 times 5 a negative 20?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay? All right, now what if I had this? Negative 1x equal 8. Negative 1x equal 8. So remember, you're trying to get the variable x by itself. I don't have the variable x by itself. I have negative 1x by itself. So right now, what am I multiplying the variable by? Negative 1. That's the coefficient. What's the opposite of multiplying by negative 1?
Divide by negative 1.
Divide by negative 1. So divide both sides by negative 1, just like this. Just like you did in the previous two equations. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So you do this, put a 1 there. 1 times x is x. A positive 8 divided by negative 1 is a negative 8. And it kind of makes sense because if you check, I'm going to go back to the original. Wherever you see the variable x, what do you plug in? Not 8, negative 8. So -1 times a -8, is that equal to a +8? Yes, that is 8. So they equal. Now, what if you had this?
So you know how you're making us write the 1 and the 0?
The 1, 0?
Like the 1 or the 0?
Yes.
Would you mark us wrong if we put like 1x to like know what that 1 stands for?
You mean 1x here?
No. When you cross it out.
Where that little one,
Like where you have that 1, would you mark it wrong if I put an x behind
the other
it?
one, the little
Then if you put, she's asking,
Like I know it's not, like I know it's going to be x. But,
okay,
Like I've never used that, so I'm going to like confuse myself with that 1.
why would you confuse yourself with that 1? 1
'Cause
times,
I've never used that 1.
so she was to write it like this.
Yeah.
She was to say that this right here is what? That. That's what you're
I
saying.
mean, I know it's x. Okay, never mind. I don't wanna confuse you.
No, you're not confusing me. I'm just,
I mean, I know it's x, but I've never used, like, I've never had to put, like, I've never put a 1,
well, shame whoever told you that.
so, yeah.
Okay? Shame on that person. All right. Over here, what is the coefficient of x?
Negative.
-1. So what you may want to do is rewrite that to look like the previous problem. So in other words, rewrite -x as what? -1x. And now you know what to do. What's the next step?
Divide
By what?
-1.
-1. And so -1 divided by -1 is 1. 1 times x is x. And what does x equal? -7. Now, knowing what we just did, you can actually go back to one of the examples we did a while ago, and now you can do either way. So let me go back to, let's do a different example so I can show you. So let's go and look at number, let's actually do 20 again, but instead of bringing the variables to the right, let's bring the variables to the left. So we're going to do 20 again. All right, so here's 20. And this was on page 630, number 20. Yeah. Number 20 was the same one we just did. So you have -4 times z minus 3 equal 2 minus 3z. So that was number 20. So the first step's the same that we did a while ago. So what's the first step? Distribute. So you get -4z plus 12 equal 2 minus 3z. Okay? All right, now what we did was we brought the variables to the right and the constants to the left. All right, let's do the other way around. Just see what happens, because some of you are going to do that. So you need to know that it doesn't matter which side you bring things on, which side you bring terms on. So let's go ahead and this time, a while ago, we subtracted 2, right, from both sides. This time, let's get rid of the 12. So I'm going to ask you, is adding 12 or subtracting 12 going to help? Subtracting 12. And I'm going to line my like terms, just like this. So this is called the addition property of equality. And when you use the addition property of equality, usually the next step is to do what? Combine like terms. So what's a -12 and a +12? 0. So what's on the left? Okay, equal. What's 2 and a -12? -10. So it's -10 what though? Minus 3z. All right, so that's where I'm at. Okay. Now, at this point, the only constant I see is on which side? The right. So let's leave it there. So let's bring the variables to the left. Is adding 3z or subtracting 3z going to help? Adding. So I'm going to add 3z to both sides. And now I'm going to, remember this is called the addition property of equality. What's the next step? Combine like terms. What's a -4z and a +3z? Not z. You got to be careful. It's negative what? Negative z, or you can say what? negative 1z. So I know a while ago I said mathematically if you see 1x or 1z, we prefer you to write as what? Z. But that's not 1z, that's what? Negative 1z. So negative z. So rewriting negative 1z, so we'll give you an idea what to do next. So I have negative 1z equal, this is 0, and 10. Now remember, I'm trying to get z by itself. Now that we just talked about multiplication property equality, how do I get z by itself? No, see, you divide by negative 1. You divide by the coefficient. See, you're not, at this point, there's still some of you that are not knowing what you're seeing. I don't have negative 1 plus z. This is what? Negative 1 times z, where that negative 1 is a coefficient. And the opposite of multiplication is division. So some of you that are thinking I add 1, you seem to think that you're going to use the addition property all the time. No, at this point I don't use the addition property. What property do I use? Multiplication property of equality. So the next step is to do what to both sides? Divide by what? Negative 1. Good. And so negative 1 divided by negative 1 is?
0.
See? Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. Some of you are still saying 0. You have a habit of knowing that for some reason, every time you cross something out like this, you get automatically 0. You don't. You don't get automatically 0. You got to look at what you have. Negative 1 divided by, that's a division. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. That's not 0. 1 times z is z. If you said 0, that would have been 0 right here. And 0 does not equal 10. What equals 10? Z.
Well, you make that make sense. So then that way if you get confused, you know in the end you're looking for your variable.
Right. Yeah.
So are you gonna basically, how are they gonna act, when you do that whole problem, I mean, I understand how you do it, but what's the question gonna be?
Solve.
Solve for what? Just solve?
Whenever you solve an equation, you're solving for the variable.
So then we would know to do the addition and then the multiplication?
Yes. And then distributive property and all that.
Right, so we do that.
Yeah. Now next semester, you're going to have all kinds of equations. In college algebra, it's even more. So in this course, all you're dealing with in this course is what's called linear equations. Linear equations. Next semester, you're going to have quadratic equations. Semester after that in college algebra, you're going to have rational equations, square root equations, absolute value equations, and so on. Each one's done differently. So you have to know that, hey, if I'm dealing with a linear equation, this is what I got to do. If I'm dealing with a quadratic equation, you remember this about quadratic equations, and there are different methods of solving it. But for the most part, you can always solve a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. You may remember those words, quadratic formula. Solving a rational equation, which you're going to solve a rational equation next semester as well. I forgot about that. A rational equation next semester, that's solved differently than these as well.
Will it ask you to solve it?
It's going to say solve. That's all it's going to say. You have to know what equation you're dealing with. Okay?
It's like learning how to read all over again. Different
Pretty much. You have to know what kind of equation you're dealing with, because the kind of equation you're dealing with is a different approach to how you're going to solve it. All right. So these are linear. Now, everything in here in this course is linear.
All right. 99, we're gonna do the,
Other kinds, quadratic and rational equations.
and everything else.
In college algebra, everything else.
See, this is what makes it difficult about coming back to school after like 15 years,
You're right.
20 years.
Yep. But you can do it. You can do it. People do it all the time. There's many students that graduate from this college. You can do it. All right, 22. Every semester they have a graduation, so you can do it. It's what you put into it that matters. All right, 22. 1/5 x minus 1 equal negative 4/5 x minus 13. So now that we know about the multiplication property, it doesn't matter what side you bring things on, because we know that if we have a negative x, we know how to deal with that now. So I'm going to ask you, do you want to bring the variables to the left, or do you want to bring the variables to the right?
Left.
The left? Okay, it does not matter. And it does not matter, by the way, whether you bring the constants to each side first. It does not matter. So do you want to deal with the variables first, or do you want to deal with the constants first? Constants? Okay. All right. So we talked about bringing the variables to the left. Is that what y'all said?
Yes.
So that means you want to bring the constants to the
Right.
right. All right. So let's go with this negative 1. Adding 1 to both sides. Notice I'm aligning my like terms. So remember, this is called the addition property of equality. Now I don't have parentheses. I'm not using the distributive property. Okay, then once you use the addition property of equality, the next step is to combine like terms. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 1/5 x and 0 is still what? 1/5 x. 1/5 x plus 0 is still 1/5 x. Just like this. Equal. Now what do I get on the left when I combine like terms? I'm sorry, on the right. Negative 4/5 x minus 12. Good. A negative 13 and a positive 1 is a negative 12. A couple more steps and you're done. What's the next step? No. Bring the variables to the left. So is adding 4/5 x, not subtracting. So remember, you're always going to ask yourself, is adding or subtracting going to help? Well, subtraction is not going to help because those are not opposites. You want opposites here. So adding 4/5 x to both sides, 4/5. All right, now look how simple this is now. What's 1/5 x plus 4/5 x? 5/5 x. Look, 5/5 x, right? 5 over 5, you can't see it. 5 over 5 is what? 1. 1 times x is x. So that's just what? X. I'm asking you again. What's 1/5 x plus 4/5 x? Which is just x. Equal? What's this right here? 0. 0 to negative 12 is still, and you got x by itself. So there's your solution. That's all you do. Okay? Now, if you brought things the other side, you would have gotten a negative x equal 12. Then you would have to divide both sides by negative 1.
Not add 1.
That's right. Not add 1. That is correct. All right, let's look at 26. All right, 26.
We don't have time to work it the other way.
Let me
It's okay if you don't.
just see me after class, and I will with you. Okay?
Okay.
I'm just trying to
Okay.
do enough here to not fall too far behind. Yeah, that's 4p. Minus 11. Minus p. Equal 2 plus 2p minus 20. Okay, so step 1 is to use the distributive property if you can, and there's no parentheses there. Step 2 is what?
Combine like terms.
Okay, you combine like terms on which side?
The left
And
and the right.
the right. So on both sides. So let's do the left first. On the left side, I can combine which terms?
4p and negative p.
All right, what's 4p and a negative p?
3p.
3p. So I get 3p minus 11, right? On this side, I can combine what? What are those terms called right here? Constants. So I get 2p and a what? Minus 18. Okay. All right. Now, let's go ahead and some of you may want to bring the variables on which side? The left. Some of you may want to bring the variables on the Right. Since earlier, last time I brought the variables to the left and it came out to be nice, I'm going to go ahead this time and bring the variables to the right, just to show you what's going to happen. All right, if I bring the variables to the right, and that may help you in the other one you asked me to do. Okay, if I bring the variables to the right, I'm going to subtract 3p from both sides, right? 3p and the negative 3p is no 0, right? 0 minus 11 is
11.
no, which is negative 11. Got to be careful. 2p minus 3p, got to be careful. Negative p or negative 1p, right? Minus 18, y'all agree? Yes. All right, notice how many times y'all could have messed up here if you weren't careful. Now what's the next step?
Would you add 18?
Yep, add 18 to both sides. So remember, well, what I'm doing here is the addition property of equality. Addition property of equality. And then each time I use addition property of equality, I combine like terms. So that's how I got this. So when I combine like terms, what is this left side? What is this left side, guys? 7. Equal. When I combine like terms, negative 18 and 18 is 0. What's negative 1p and 0?
Negative 1p.
All right. And how do you get p by itself? Divide by
Negative 1.
negative 1.
So negative 7.
Yep. So negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. 1 times p is p equal negative 7. So that's your solution. All right. Now remember, you got some of it messed up in a few places. So the worksheets where you want to mess up rather than the test, because you learn from those worksheets where your errors are. So 0 minus 11 is not 11. 0 minus 11 is negative 11. So you got to be careful. Now you're going to, if your mathematics is correct, except for maybe you made a little error here, you get most of your points. So you don't get all of it incorrect. But remember though, you're also graded on show work as presented in class. So show work as presented in class. So what I need for you to do when you do that worksheet is look at these notes, how they work. Now some of you aren't writing anything. I'm hoping when you do that worksheet and it says show work as presented in class, you're going to go to Canvas and or download those notes, right? All right, so don't mess things up. You want to get as many points as you can. It's easy to get those points.
It's easy to not get those points.
What was that?
One little mistake, you don't get a point.
Yeah. But you learn from those worksheets.
Yes.
30. All right, 30, you have 2/5 x minus 1/12 equals negative 3/5 x minus 3/4. 3/5 x minus 3/4. All right, don't make it difficult. You dealt with fractions already since the first week. All right, let's bring the variables to the left. So let's start with the variables first. What would I do to both sides? Add 3/5 x, right? Combining like terms, just like this. So I'm doing now. What property am I doing right now? Addition property. Now, once you do addition property, what's the next step? Combine like terms. So this is what I'm saying. What's 2/5 plus 3/5? 5/5, which is what number? 1. So I'm going to ask you again. What is 2/5 x plus 3/5 x? 1x or just x? That's just x, right? Minus 1/12 equal, combine like terms. These are opposites. You get 0 when you add them up. What's 0 minus 3/4? Be careful. What's 0 minus 3/4? Negative 3/4. All right, so that's where I'm at. Okay. Now all you do now is get x by itself. What's the next step? One more step and you're done.
Add 1/12.
Add 1/12 to both sides. And use your calculator. 1/12. 1/12. Now when I did this plus 1/12 plus 1/12, what property did I just use here? Addition property of equality. Now I'm going to do what next?
Find LCD.
No. Combine like terms though, right? Combine like terms.
Right.
What's negative 1/12 plus 1/12?
0.
X plus 0 is x. Okay. Now you can let's do this with a calculator first. So in your calculator, again, take this calculator out. If you have a different one, make sure you know how to use it before the test. So you're going to say negative 3/4. Your negative button is right here. So you're going to say negative. Notice the negative shows up. 3 divided by 4 plus 1 divided by 12. Press equal. So there's your decimal. Then you got to change it to a fraction. So you press second, PRB, equal, and you get this proper fraction, in which case, though, it's negative. So negative 2/3, negative 2/3. Now, if you do it by finding the LCD, this is what you're going to do. Negative 3/4 plus 1/12. What's the at least common denominator of 4 and 12? So you write two fractions with 12 as the denominator. 4 times what is 12? 3. What I do to the denominator, I have to do to the negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. So 3/4 is equivalent to 9/12. Negative 3/4 is equivalent to negative 9/12. 12 times what is 12? 1 times 1 is 1. In fact, 1/12 is equivalent to itself. Now, since the denominators are the same, you add their numerators. Negative 9 plus 1 is negative 8. So I got negative 8 what, though? 12. Then you got to reduce. What do both of these have in common? 2. They're both even, so they're both divisible by 2. So if you want to use 2, you can. But you could have used also 4. Negative 8 divided by 4. 12 divided by 4. What's negative 8 divided by 4? Negative 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. And that's what you got. Okay? All right. Okay, so let me see what I can give you at this point